Admiral Theodore Theo Morgan was not having a good day. Actually, that was the understatement of the century. As he stared at the holographic display showing 700 alien warships materializing just beyond Mars' orbit, catastrophic seemed more appropriate. "Someone please explain to me why I'm the one handling this," Theo groaned, straightening his hastily donned uniform. The collar itched. Everything itched when you were about to become the first human to speak with a potentially hostile alien armada. General Rivera, a woman whose perpetual frown had only deepened in the last hour, gestured at the screen. "Because our actual diplomats are in Geneva, 12 hours away, and you're the highest-ranking officer with diplomatic training available." "I took one course 15 years ago," Theo protested, "and I got a C-. Congratulations on your promotion to Earth's ambassador," Rivera replied dryly. "Try not to get us all killed." The communication screen flickered to life, revealing what appeared to be a cross between a mantis and a Komodo dragon, if both had evolved to wear military uniforms. Its exoskeleton gleamed under harsh lighting, and 4 arms moved in precise, unsettling synchronization. "Greetings, Earth dwellers. I am Commander Zoltak of the Grax Confederation fleet." The translation came through in a flat, computerized tone. "We have arrived to determine if your species is worthy of continued existence or should be harvested for resources and living space." Theo swallowed. "Hard. Well, that's direct. I'm Admiral Theodore Morgan, representing Earth. Perhaps we could discuss this over coffee or whatever beverage your species enjoys." The alien's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or hunger. Hard to tell with giant space bugs. "We will conduct formal evaluation in 12 of your Earth hours. Prepare your best representative to make your case. Be advised that we have encountered 37 civilizations at your development stage, but these 6 no longer exist." The screen went black. "That went well," Theo muttered. General Rivera was already barking orders. "Get me every satellite feed, weapons system, and evacuation protocol, and somebody find me our actual diplomats." A young lieutenant approached timidly. "Man, preliminary analysis shows their weapons technology is, well, we'd have better luck throwing rocks at them, and full planetary evacuation would take weeks, not hours." "So we're royally screwed," Theo summarized. Rivera's expression hardened. "Not yet. Morgan, you've got 12 hours to figure out how to save humanity. I suggest you start by assembling a team." As Theo left the command center, the weight of 7 billion lives pressed down on his shoulders. His diplomatic skills were mediocre at best. Earth's military stood no chance, and the clock was already ticking. All he had was 12 hours and a C- in basic diplomatic relations, against 700 warships. Yeah, definitely not a good day. "Let me get this straight," said Professor Harold Jenkins, adjusting his thick glasses. "You want linguists, diplomats, and comedians?" Theo nodded frantically. "Yes, and hurry. We've got 11 hours until the aliens decide whether to turn Earth into their new vacation resort or whatever harvesting means." The emergency command center, hastily established in a former mall food court, because apocalypses don't wait for proper venues, was filling with Earth's hastily assembled last hope. Diplomats video conferencing from Geneva looked simultaneously jet-lagged and terrified. 3 stand-up comedians argued about whether alien invasion jokes were now too on the nose. A cluster of military personnel stood awkwardly near the former Cinnabon, looking as useful as swimsuits in a blizzard. "Admiral Morgan?" Theo turned to find a woman with wild red hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing mismatched socks and a t-shirt that read linguistics, because someone has to understand what you're saying. She carried a tablet and what appeared to be a half-eaten burrito. "Dr. Vivian Hartley," she introduced herself, not offering a hand or even making eye contact. "I specialize in theoretical xenolinguistics and computational language analysis. Also, your tie is crooked. We're facing extinction." "I'm not worried about my tie," Theo replied. "You should be. Studies show proper appearance increases diplomatic success rates by 17%. She finally looked up from her tablet. "Also, we're all going to die unless we decipher what little Grax communication we've received and find a cultural weak point. Theo blinked. That's blunt. I don't do social niceties. I do patterns. And I'd been analyzing the linguistic patterns in Commander Zoltak's brief message. She thrust her tablet at Theo, showing incomprehensible diagrams and charts. The Grax language contains unusual harmonic resonances suggesting their communication is not just verbal but partially pheromonally based. In English, Doctor. Viv sighed dramatically. They communicate partly through smell, which means their language has emotional components built directly into their grammar. Their threat assessment isn't just about our technology or resources, it's about how we express ourselves. A comedian who had wandered over his name tag, Reed Dave, chimed in. So we need to, what, smell impressive? We need to communicate in a way that demonstrates complexity they respect, Vivi corrected. And based on the limited data, there's one human communication form they might find particularly impressive, humor. Theo stared. You're saying we need to make the aliens laugh? Not exactly, Viv said, grabbing a marker and approaching a glass wall, which she immediately began covering with equations and alien symbols. Humor requires cultural context. What's funny to us might be a declaration of war to them. But there's something about their language structure. She circled a symbol repeatedly. They respect linguistic complexity, particularly concepts that collapse multiple meanings into singular expressions. Like puns? Offered Dave. More like a perfect sentence that means completely different things in different contexts, Viv replied, still scribbling frantically. A linguistic quantum state. Theo watched her work, hope kindling for the first time since the alien ships appeared. You think you can craft something like that? With help from your comedians for creative lateral thinking and your diplomats for cultural sensitivity. Viv finally smiled, though it looked somewhat unpracticed. I think I can create the most important sentence humanity has ever uttered. Theo surveyed the unlikely assemblage of humanity's last hope. Well then, let's get to work. We need a punchline that saves the world. 7 hours until the Grax deadline. Theo paced the length of the repurposed food court, glancing occasionally at the cluster of linguists and comedians huddled around Viv. The diplomats had divided into teams, some researching historical first contacts on Earth for precedent, others analyzing the limited data on Grax appearance for cultural insights. They're having the time of their lives, remarked General Rivera, appearing at Theo's side with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. Nothing brings people together like impending doom. Theo accepted the coffee gratefully. Any updates from the military side? Well, we've positioned what pathetic defenses we have, and evacuation protocols are ready for key personnel. She shrugged. Though evacuation in this case means hide in bunkers and hope the aliens don't have good scanners. Encouraging. I'm a general, not a motivational speaker. Rivera's typically stern expression softened slightly. What about your team of misfits? Any progress? Theo glanced at Viv, who was now engaged in what appeared to be a heated argument with Dave the comedian about the comedic timing of extinction-level events. They're working on what Vivi calls the punchliner. A sentence crafted specifically to exploit something in Grax language or psychology. Honestly, it sounds like grasping at straws. Got any better straws to grasp? Point taken. A young lieutenant approached with a tablet. Sir, we've intercepted more Grax communications internal chatter between ships. Theo took the tablet, skimming the translated fragments. Most were procedural. But certain phrases stood out, harvesting quotas, species evaluation metrics, and disturbingly, processing capacity. They're treating this like a business trip, he murmured. Bureaucrats with doomsday weapons. The universe has a sick sense of humor, Rivera commented. Across the room, Viv suddenly stood up, knocking over a chair. I need to see those intercepts. Without waiting for permission, she rushed over and snatched the tablet from Theo's hands. Please help yourself, Theo muttered sarcastically. Viv's eyes darted rapidly across the screen. This changes everything. Look at these recurring phrases, their assessment criteria. The Grax don't just conquer randomly, they have a specific evaluation system. For what? Rivera asked. Intelligence, creativity, and something our translator renders as dimensional thinking. I think they're looking for species that think beyond linear problem-solving. V was practically vibrating with excitement. And there's something else, references to previous encounters where species were spared because they demonstrated resonant parallelism. Theo raised an eyebrow. Which means? The ability to communicate one thing while simultaneously conveying another, completely different meaning. Viv grinned. Exactly what we're trying to create with the punchline. For the first time, Theo felt a flicker of genuine hope. So this might actually work. It might, Vivi conceded. If we get it exactly right. As the hours ticked by, Theo found himself reminiscing about his life before becoming humanity's last hope. He'd joined the space service after college, more interested in seeing the stars than climbing the ranks. His ex-wife had called him pathologically non-confrontational, a trait that had tanked both his marriage and his career ambitions. Now, ironically, the fate of humanity rested on his ability to confront an alien commander. 5 hours to deadline. The food court was a scene of organized chaos. Viv had assembled a linguistic model of Grax communication patterns, while the comedians tested phrases against it. The diplomats had constructed a rudimentary cultural profile based on the intercepted communications. They value hierarchy, noted one diplomat. Every communication begins with rank acknowledgement. And precision, added another. Their time measurements are accurate to the millisecond. Theo watched as Viv scribbled another formula on the glass wall, her handwriting becoming increasingly illegible with excitement. I think we've got it, she announced finally, the perfect sentence. It acknowledges their superiority while simultaneously challenging it, references their evaluation criteria while subverting it, and contains a nested meaning that will only become apparent after initial translation. Will it work? Theo asked. Viv hesitated. In theory. But someone has to deliver it with exactly the right inflection and timing. All eyes turned to Theo. Oh no, he protested. I'm the guy who got a C- in diplomacy, remember? Which means you're just bad enough to be perfect, Viv replied. The punchline requires a delivery that seems straightforward but contains subtle undertones. Your mediocrity is actually an asset here. That's not as reassuring as you probably think it is. Thea sighed. 1 hour remained, and Earth held its breath. The diplomatic chamber, hastily converted from a United Nations conference room, gleamed with polished surfaces and nervous sweat. Theo stood alone at the center, having insisted that no one else risk their lives in what might well be humanity's last conversation. You remember the punchline? Viv's voice came through his nearly invisible earpiece. Yes, for the 17th time, Theo muttered, though I still think this is insane. Insanity is trying the same diplomatic approaches that have failed 36 other civilizations, she countered. Trust the science. Admiral. The air shimmered, and suddenly Commander Zoltak materialized before him, all 8 feet of mantis lizard intimidation in ceremonial armor that reflected light in impossible ways. In person, the Grax was even more terrifying, with mandibles that clicked rhythmically and 4 arms that moved in perfect, unsettling synchronization. Behind Zoltak, 2 smaller Grax appeared, each carrying what looked suspiciously like sophisticated scanning equipment. Admiral Theodore Morgan, Zoltak's translator, produced the flat, computerized voice. You stand before the evaluation committee of the Grax Confederation. Your species will now be assessed for continued existence validity. Theo bowed slightly, remembering Viv's coaching. Commander Zoltak, we are honored by your thoroughness. The scanner-wielding Grax moved forward, chittering to each other as their devices whirred and blinked. The preliminary scans indicate typical development patterns, one reported. Resource consumption exceeds sustainability metrics. Technological advancement approximately standard for Stage 3 civilization. Zoltak's mandibles clicked. Unremarkable, proceed with standard intelligence assessment. What followed was the strangest job interview of Theo's life, if job interviews determined whether your entire species lived or died. Questions ranged from mathematical problems to ethical dilemmas, all delivered in that same flat, translated monotone. Your responses are within acceptable parameters. Though uninspiring, Zoltak noted after Theo fumbled through an explanation of human ethical frameworks. We have encountered such patterns in species 27b and 42f. Neither warranted preservation. Theo's heart sank. In his ear, Viv whispered, "They're following the script exactly. Stick to the plan." Clearing his throat, Theo attempted the diplomatic approach. "The commander, surely there are peaceful options for our species to coexist. We have much to offer the galactic community. Your species consumes resources inefficiently and reproduces exponentially," Zoltak responded. "The mathematical outcome is predetermined. However, protocol requires assessment of all evaluation metrics before harvesting begins." One of the scanner operators approached Zoltak, chittering rapidly in their native language. The universal translator struggled, producing only fragments. "Unusual neural patterns, recommend further testing, potential anomaly." Zoltak turned back to Theo. "Your brain exhibits unexpected complexity for your species development stage. Explain." "I read a lot," Theo offered weakly. In his ear, Viv hissed, "Now. Use the punchline now." Theo took a deep breath. This was humanity's last shot, a Hail Mary linguistic experiment based on limited data and wild theorizing. If it failed, at least he wouldn't have long to regret it. "The Commander Zoltak," he began, carefully maintaining the exact cadence Viv had drilled into him. "Before you render judgment, I must acknowledge that while your assessment follows standard protocols, perhaps the most efficient harvesting requires recognizing when the crop has already harvested itself." The translation hung in the air between them. For exactly 12 seconds, there was complete silence. Commander Zoltak froze. Literally froze, not a mandible twitched, not an eye blinked. The scanner operators likewise stood motionless, their instruments suddenly silent. In Theo's ear, Viv whispered urgently, "What's happening? Did it work? Say something." But Theo remained silent, watching as the alien commander's exoskeleton gradually shifted color from greenish-black to a mottled purple. The scanner operators began to vibrate slightly, emitting a high-pitched sound just at the edge of human hearing. Finally, after what felt like eternity but was actually only 30 seconds, Zoltak spoke, but not through the translator. Instead, a series of clicks, hisses, and what might have been chimes emanated from the commander's mandibles. The scanner operators responded with similar sounds, their vibrations intensifying. Theo stood perfectly still, sweat trickling down his back. "Viv," he whispered, "the translator isn't working." "No," she replied slowly. "I think they've disabled it deliberately. But look at their color changes, that's part of their natural communication system. The purple hue indicates, I think it's something like extreme surprise or recalculation." Abruptly, Zoltak reactivated the translator. "Your statement requires clarification. Repeat precisely." Theo glanced at the small camera feeding video back to the command center, where Viv would be watching. She had warned him this might happen, that the punchline might require repetition to fully process through Grax communication centers. Taking another deep breath, Theo repeated verbatim, "While your assessment follows standard protocols, perhaps the most efficient harvesting requires recognizing when the crop has already harvested itself." This time, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Zoltak's exoskeleton flared bright orange, and the commander emitted a sound that the translator didn't even attempt to process, something between a musical note and the sound of shattering glass. The scanner operators backed away, their instruments now emitting pulsing lights in patterns Theo couldn't begin to interpret. "You," Zoltak's translator struggled, "have employed recursive parallelism with dimensional inversion. This communication technique has not been observed in any Stage 3 civilization previously encountered." In Theo's ear, Viv was practically screaming with excitement. It worked. The sentence created a linguistic paradox in their translation system. Their language processes literal and metaphorical meanings simultaneously, and we just gave them a statement that inverts the power dynamic while acknowledging it. Theo had no idea what that meant, but Zoltak wasn't shooting him, so he considered it progress. Furthermore, The Grax commander continued, mandibles now clicking at triple speed. The implication of self-assessment violates standard evaluation protocols but adheres to meta-protocol efficiency guidelines. One of the scanner operators approached Zoltak again, chittering urgently. The commander's color shifted again, this time to a deep blue. He signaled the fleet. Zoltak ordered, no longer addressing Theo, species reclassification required. He invoked Directive 7 Omega. Theo remained silent, afraid to disrupt whatever miraculous misunderstanding was occurring. In his ear, Viv was frantically analyzing every word and color change. Admiral Theodore Morgan. Zoltak finally said, turning back to face him, your species has demonstrated unexpected linguistic sophistication. The harvesting assessment is suspended pending full cultural analysis. Before Theo could respond, a communications officer burst into the room. Admiral, the alien fleet they're leaving. All 700 ships just made a simultaneous jump to faster than light. Zoltak's exoskeleton rippled in what might have been amusement. This evaluation unit remains to establish preliminary diplomatic protocols. Your statement will be studied extensively. It contains implications our Confederation must consider carefully. Theo blinked. So we passed the test? You altered the parameters of assessment, Zoltak corrected, a previously unobserved outcome. Most efficient indeed. As the implications sank in Earth was saved, humanity would survive. Theo felt light-headed with relief. I look forward to establishing those diplomatic protocols, Commander. As do I, Admiral, Zoltak replied. Your species promises to be entertainingly unpredictable. In the command center, cheers erupted as the Grax fleet disappeared from radar. Viv danced an awkward victory jig, while diplomats and comedians embraced an unlikely celebration. Humanity had been saved by a single, perfectly crafted sentence, a linguistic trick that somehow convinced 700 warships to turn and run. Let me get this straight, said the President of the United States, rubbing his temples. We saved Earth with a pun? Not exactly a pun. VV corrected, now wearing a slightly more formal t-shirt that read Xenolinguistics saved the world, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. It was a paralogical statement containing simultaneous contradictory truths that exploited the Grax's dual processing communication system. Theo, sitting beside her in the Oval Office, translated, we basically gave them the alien equivalent of a blue screen of death. The Grax processed literal and metaphorical meanings simultaneously. Viv continued excitedly. When Theo said the crop has already harvested itself, their linguistic centers had to process both our acknowledgement of their power to harvest us and the paradoxical implication that we had somehow already done their job for them. It's like telling someone this statement is a lie, Theo added. Nihilation, except to the Grax. It created a cultural identity crisis. The President looked between them. And this sentence made 700 warships retreat. That's the fascinating part. Viv leaned forward eagerly. According to Zoltak, who's been surprisingly forthcoming since establishing the embassy, the Grax Confederation has rigid cultural protocols. They harvest species that don't demonstrate dimensional thinking, the ability to operate on multiple cognitive levels simultaneously. Our little paradox sentence proved we think in ways they respect, Theo explained. But more importantly, it invoked something called Directive 7 Omega Protocol for encountering species with unexpected cognitive abilities. The directive requires comprehensive cultural study before any harvesting decision, Viv added. And preliminary analysis of our humor concept has them completely fascinated. Apparently, most species they encounter are boringly straightforward. Lucky for us humans, we're anything but straightforward, the President mused. In the 3 weeks since the incident, as it was now officially known in UN documents, Earth had undergone dramatic changes. The Grax had established a small embassy in what used to be a Bennigan's restaurant. Zoltak had developed an unexpected fondness for mozzarella sticks. 17 other alien civilizations had made contact, apparently curious about the species that had confounded the dreaded Grax Confederation. Theo had been officially appointed Earth's first ambassador to extraterrestrial civilizations. a position he accepted with the same bewildered resignation with which he'd handled first contact. His ex-wife had called to congratulate him, then asked if his new alien friends could help move her furniture. "There's one thing I still don't understand," the president said. "If this sentence was so powerful, why didn't any of the 36 other civilizations think of it?" "Because," Vivi explained, her expression softening, "most species optimize for logical consistency and clear communication. Only humans are ridiculous enough to develop entire art forms based on deliberate misunderstanding and paradox. Our greatest weakness, talking without saying anything clear, turned out to be our greatest strength," Theo added with a smile. Later, as they left the White House, Theo and Viv paused to watch tourists taking selfies with the small Grax cultural delegation visiting the National Mall. The aliens' initial terrifying appearance had quickly become Earth's newest fascination, with Grax-inspired fashion already appearing in Milan and Paris. "You know what the best part is?" Viv asked, actually making eye contact for once. "The Grax have shared their translation of the punchline with 17 other spacefaring civilizations, and none of them can figure it out either. We've become the species that tells jokes no one understands but everyone respects. So humanity's diplomatic strategy is basically confuse them with bullshit?" Theo laughed. Hey, it's working so far." Viv shrugged. "Zoltak told me yesterday that the Grax High Command is establishing a permanent research division dedicated to human humor. We're literally weaponizing dad jokes for galactic peace." Theo shook his head in amazement. "All this time we were building missiles when we should have been training comedians." "The universe has a sense of humor after all," Viv agreed. "Oh, by the way, Zoltak invited us to dinner tonight. Apparently there's another alien delegation arriving the Nox hegemony. They're supposed to be even more fearsome than the Grax." "Great," Theo sighed. "Do we have another civilization-saving punchline ready?" Viv grinned mischievously. "Better. I've prepared a knock-knock joke that, according to my calculations, might accidentally make you their emperor." As they walked toward the Grax embassy, formerly Bennigan's, Theo reflected on how quickly the absurd becomes normal. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a mediocre admiral with a C- in diplomacy. Now he was Earth's representative to the stars, armed with nothing but humanity's unique talent for saying one thing and meaning another. Perhaps the universe wasn't so vast and terrifying after all. Perhaps it was just waiting for someone to deliver the right punchline.